look at the bigger picture here, do you think that renewable industry, would be the opportunity for investment? In other words, would be, the mega trend for investment theme?
Look, that's a good question. I think globally we've seen some real changes, and there are probably some both positive and negative trends in terms of investment. Since about 2000, if you look from about 2000 to about 2008, the positive trend line in terms of investment was around, say, 30% a year growth in terms of investment in renewables globally. We reached in 2010 about 260 billion US in terms of investment. Like most other industries in 2008, we saw a fair levelling off in investment, although there was no reduction in investment, which perhaps was unusual.
Right.
Another big jump in 2009 of about 31% globally. Level off in 2011, and the Q1 results for 2012 have significantly fallen off.
Oh, okay.
I think the negative trends globally, if we look at perhaps three negative trends, number one is investment in general. The state of the world economy at this point in time, as we know, is difficult.
Right.
There's not much money for capital. We're very capital constrained, and we're both particularly debt constrained, and large infrastructure projects or even smaller infrastructure projects require a level of leverage, and that leverage is not really available at this point in time. The second negative element perhaps is the collapse of carbon prices and the collapse of the carbon market. One of the positive revenue streams, if you like, that renewables had been able to generate was carbon credits and carbon offsets. Until the collapse of the Kyoto Protocol, there was a very efficient trading mechanism in the EU, the EU ETS, or the Emissions Trading Scheme. At its peak, that was trading at around €17 per tonne for carbon. So for renewables developers who were offsetting carbon, they were not able just to sell their electricity. They had €17 a tonne which they could sell and trade on the EU ETS. The Kyoto Protocol, as we know, wasn't renewed, and that scheme is now much more problematic for non-EU producers to access after the end of this year. And I think that perhaps the third negative trend is a pure economic trend, and that economic trend is the price of fossil fuels. We've seen the price of oil come off 20% in the last 12 months. And you've got fossil fuels competing with renewables as a source of power development and generation or power usage. At 20% cheaper, it's a lot cheaper to invest in fossil fuels than it was 12 months ago. So as a competitive force and a competitive product, we are seeing more investment back in traditional fossil fuels.
So what are the opportunities in renewable energy actually?
Look, I think on the positive side there's a global environmental lobby and an environmental push. There's a general understanding that there are externalities associated with fossil fuels. We do get global warming, and even though we still have some skeptics, I think the general market would accept that fossil fuels cause a level of global warming. That global warming used to be taxed to some extent when we had an efficient carbon market. Now we've only got Australia, which is imposing a carbon tax, and even that might go if we get a change of government. But there's, other than the EU and Australia, there's no real tax of carbon going on globally. Regardless of that, if you look, I read a fascinating report the other day by the WWF. Admittedly, it was a policy report. I'm sure it was written with the expectation that it wouldn't be implemented. But it looked at, by 2050, a feasible solution to 100% renewable energy globally and a complete replacement of fossil fuels. Now, the investment cost, €1 trillion a year from now until 2050 in order to achieve that. So obviously very significant. So we've got the environmental lobby and an understanding that there are externalities associated with fossil fuels. And I think the second positive element, particularly if we look at a country like Thailand, is fuel security. Thailand is a net importer of energy. And Thailand has the opportunity, particularly with a strong agricultural base, to be able to develop a strong renewable sector. And that renewable sector, both from a primary energy and an electricity point of view, allows Thailand an element of energy security without having to rely upon neighbours or be subject to the price movements or the volatilities associated with fossil fuel.